pandemic could make it more difficult for the U.S. Air Force's newest F-35 squadron to organize its personnel and jets on schedule. The 356th Fighter Squadron at Eielson Air Force Base, Alaska, became the service's northernmost fighter squadron after receiving its first two F-35s. Pilots began flying those jets for training 3 days later, and another 4 F-35s on loan from Hill Air Force Base in Utah flew to Alaska. But a couple key challenges could hamper the assemblage of the new squadron, said Col. Benjamin Bishop, commander of the base's 354th Fighter Wing. We're actually on timeline, he told Defense News in an exclusive interview on April 28. We have the pilots and maintainers already here to support operations throughout the summer. However, as you know, the Department of Defense has put a stop movements order through, and that is something we're working through on a case-by-case basis. Under the current order, pilots and maintainers who are moving through the training pipeline have been granted a blanket exception to transfer to Eielson. But more experienced pilots, maintainers and support personnel coming from an operational base like Hill Air Force Base will need to receive an exception. Getting additional F-35s to Eielson could also be an obstacle, as Lockheed Martin assesses whether it must slow down deliveries of the F-35 due to disruptions to its supply chain. In a statement to Defense News, Lockheed spokesman Brett Ashworth could not say whether the company was on track to deliver F-35s to Eielson on schedule. Lockheed Martin continues to work with our suppliers daily to determine the impacts of COVID-19 on F-35 production, he said. We are analyzing impacts at this time and should have more detail in the coming weeks. If the coronavirus pandemic delays the pace of F-35 deliveries to Eielson, the squadron will have to mitigate the shortfall in jets, Bishop said. Currently, we're at a good pace on the road to readiness for our F-35 program here, and will continue to adapt and adjust to bring this mission capability to its full potential in the Indo-Pacific theater, he noted. Despite COVID-19 and the potential logistical challenges involved in sending people and F-35s to Eielson, day-to-day training operations have continued as normal, said Col. James Christensen, 356th Fighter Squadron commander. Having 6 F-35s on base allows maintainers to use the jets for training while also maximizing flight hours for the 8 pilots currently in the 356th. We still do the mission the way we always have. We have the masks and the wide procedures and social distancing, Christensen said. So we're being creative but still being able to get the mission done. There are strategic benefits to being the U.S. Air Force's northernmost fighter squadron, starting with access. With support from an aerial refueling tanker, the F-35s at Eielson can reach and target any location in Europe or the Asia-Pacific, Bishop said, and even the harsh climate of Eielson has its perks. It's a short flight away from the Joint Pacific-Alaska Range Complex, the Defense Department's largest instrumented training range, with 77,000 square miles of airspace, according to the 354th Fighter Wing. The F-35 is going to be able to fly in that airspace, but they're not going to be alone, Bishop said. F-35's training in that area will regularly be joined by F-22s based at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, as well as the F-16s in Eielson's 18th Aggressor Squadron that simulate enemy combat jets. You're going to see amazing 5th-generation tactics and integration tactics emerge, he said. Russia is investing in its Arctic infrastructure, and the U.S. military must make its own improvements to how it operates from and trains in the region, said General Terence O'Shaughnessy, who leads U.S. Northern Command and the North American Aerospace Defense Command. It's great to see some of the additional forces that are going in, whether it's the F-35s going to Eielson, whether it's the work of the Coast Guard to develop icebreakers, he said during a May 4th event. These are all relevant things for us to be able to operate in the Arctic. And that is absolutely, to me, key to our ability to defend ourselves. As the 356th stands up and becomes combat ready, it will participate in the next Red Flag Alaska, a multinational air-to-air combat training exercise slated to be held this August. The squadron is also looking for opportunities to deploy around the Asia-Pacific so that pilots can acclimate themselves to the long geographical distances that characterize the region. Christensen said everyone is excited just to have F-35s here because of the awesome training we can do. But we're also thinking about at some point we have to project this air power out into the Indo-Pacific theater as a combat force. And transitioning everyone, including the wing and including Pacific Air Forces, they all have to adjust the mission of Eielson, he said. Unlike other fighter bases, which usually swap out existing aircraft of existing squadrons with new jets, the two F-35 squadrons coming to Eielson aren't replacing anything, and infrastructure needs to be built to accommodate the anticipated growth in both people and aircraft. When the first members of the 356th Fighter Squadron arrived on base in July 2019, Eielson was home to about 1,750 active-duty personnel, Bishop said. By December 2021, that number is expected to double, with the addition of about 1,500 airmen. In that time, 54 F-35s will be delivered to the base for a total of 2 squadrons, a notable increase from the 30 F-16s and KC-135s previously at Eielson. An estimated $500 million will be spent on military construction to support the build-up at Eielson, including new operations buildings, a simulator building, heated hangars and other maintenance facilities, and a new cafeteria. A total of 41 facilities will be either built or refurbished with that funding, with 29 of these projects finished and others still under construction to support a second F-35 squadron, Bishop said. And everything from constructing new facilities to maintaining runways is tougher in the sub-zero temperatures of the Arctic. Early on in this job, I learned that there are 2 seasons in Alaska, Bishop said. There's winter and construction season, with the former a lot longer than the latter. From a bed-down perspective, how you put your construction plan together, you have to maneuver around that season. In order to maintain efficiency of fighter operations up here, one of the things we did is we built walled weather shelters for our aircraft, so all of our aircraft are actually housed in weather shelters, he added. That's not necessarily for the aircraft. That's more for the maintainers, because having that insulated and heating facility, now you can do maintenance around the clock. Despite tough talk from the Chinese military, the U.S. vessels completed their planned transits unhindered, and Chinese defense officials issued statements typically unconstrained by facts. The Chinese Defense Ministry called the U.S. a troublemaker and the biggest force in pushing militarization in the South China Sea without a hint of irony. A PLA Southern Command spokesperson chided Washington by urging it to focus on its own business with pandemic prevention and control, make more contributions to the global fight against the COVID-19, and immediately stop military operations that are detrimental to regional security, peace and stability. Located in the western Pacific Ocean, the South China Sea is a key commercial gateway in the Indo-Pacific region, accounting for more than $3 trillion in total trade annually. 6 nations have competing claims and interests in the South China Sea, but China is the only nation with sweeping claims of sovereignty over virtually the entire region. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague unambiguously and unanimously rejected China's expansive sovereignty claims in the South China Sea. Despite this, China has created 3,200 acres of new land in the South China Sea, transforming rock outcroppings barely breaking the surface of the water into sprawling military outposts brimming with runways, ports, fighter aircraft, radars, and naval guns. Not satisfied with simply building military power in the region and waiting for the military balance to shift sufficiently in its favor, the CCP has systematically sent its Coast Guard and People's Armed Forces maritime militia to attack and bully others in the region. In fact, earlier this year, China's Coast Guard rammed and sank a Vietnamese fishing vessel operating in the vicinity of the Paracel Islands, accusing Vietnam of fishing illegally in international waters. Countries such as Vietnam and the Philippines can expect more of the same if the U.S. is evicted from the region. China may not yet have sufficient power to deny the U.S. the ability to transit the South China Sea's vital trade routes, but Beijing is working hard to change that. Such a development would resurrect a dangerous practice of might makes right, contrary to the international laws and norms that have advanced peace and prosperity in the U.S. and in the world.